I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that you are a highly rated professional in a vital, incredibly demanding public service role.
Right, like a true advocate.
Exactly. You are an advocate. Specifically, you advocate for some of the most vulnerable children in your community.
These are students who are trying to, navigate the complexities of a completely new language,
Yeah.
right? While simultaneously trying to learn math, science, and history.
Yeah, which is no small feat. And it's a role that requires a tremendous amount of specialized knowledge.
Definitely. Not just in pedagogy, but I mean in strict federal compliance law.
And let's say you are exceptional at it. You follow every single rule. Your performance evaluations are glowing.
Yeah, year after year.
Year after year, your principal observes you and rates you as, quote, accomplished.
Which is a big deal in that system.
It is. And you have dedicated years to this specific district. You know the students' families. You know their backgrounds, their struggles.
You know the specific interventions that work for each of them.
Right. You have built this massive, invisible architecture of institutional knowledge.
Absolutely.
And then on a Tuesday afternoon, on the very last day of your 4th year in the district, you are called into the central office.
And it's usually a very short meeting.
You walk in and you are simply let go, just like that.
Wow.
You ask what you did wrong. You aren't given a reason. You ask to appeal. There is no hearing.
Right. There's no due process there.
None. You ask for a chance to improve. There's no performance improvement plan on record because, again, you are an accomplished teacher.
Exactly.
There is just a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And attached to your personnel file is a note that says, paradoxically, you are eligible for rehire.
The immediate reaction, from anyone hearing a scenario like that is suspicion.
Yeah, you think, what did they do?
Right. Human nature dictates that if someone is let go, there must be a secret. There must be some untold story of professional misconduct or a hidden failure.
Or a personality conflict that the teacher just isn't disclosing. We want to believe the system makes sense.
We really do.
We want to believe that schools, of all places, operate on a basic principle of fairness and merit. Like, if you do good work, you keep your job.
If you protect vulnerable kids, you are valued.
Right. But the reality we are examining today in this deep dive is far more sobering.
Much more.
We're basing this on our source material, which is an incredibly detailed stack of excerpts from the EL Brief, Episode 6, Chapter 3.
And those sources are really revealing.
They are, because the scenario you just described, that I just described, is not an isolated incident.
No, it's not.
It's not an anecdote about a bad principal or a single dysfunctional county. What the documentation reveals is a legally and financially optimized framework.
A framework that is operating exactly as it was designed.
That's the part that is so hard to wrap my head around. So, our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how this is happening in Kentucky's public schools right now.
Right. We are looking at a systemic pattern.
A pattern where statutory gaps, cold budget arithmetic, and structural vulnerabilities all combine to quietly cycle out these highly qualified English learner or EL specialists right before they earn tenure.
And I want to be clear, we are going to look strictly at the architecture of this pattern.
Yeah, no politics here.
Right. We aren't taking political sides. We aren't dealing in rumors or union grievances. We're going to strictly analyze the state statutes.
Just the facts from the source material?
Exactly. The financial incentives, the documented federal consequences outlined in the text. And what we will uncover is a public school system that mathematically and legally incentivizes the removal of its most experienced advocates.
So I want to start with the mechanism, because to understand how a district can legally erase an accomplished teacher without so much as a whisper of justification, we have to look at the law.
We have to look at the exact wording of the law that governs their employment.
So let's unpack this. The sources point to the Kentucky Revised Statutes, right?
Yes, specifically a provision known as KRS 161.750 subsection 2. This is the piece of legislation that dictates the rules for non-renewing a teacher who has not yet attained continuing contract status.
Right, which is the legal term for what we all casually call tenure.
Exactly.
When I was reading through the breakdown of the specific statute in the text, it felt like a typo.
It really does.
It's like, imagine renting an apartment. You pay your rent on time, you fix up the place, you're a model tenant.
The perfect renter.
Right. But the city has a local ordinance that says if you stay in the building for a full year, you automatically qualify for rent control.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So on day 364, the landlord hands you an eviction notice. Not because you're a bad tenant, but specifically because you are a good one who is about to earn permanent rights.
Yeah.
Is that essentially what this state law allows districts to do to teachers?
It is functionally identical to that scenario.
That is wild.
And the power of KRS 161.750 subsection 2 lies in its brevity. The entire procedural requirement for a superintendent to non-renew a probationary teacher is just 14 words long.
14 words. Are you serious?
I am. The statute reads, the superintendent shall notify in writing each teacher whose contract is not to be renewed for the next school year.
Okay.
It then adds a stipulation that this written notification must be delivered on or before April 30th.
Wait.
That is the absolute totality of the legal obligation.
So if I'm a superintendent and it's April 29th, I can just print out a generic form letter,
Right.
hand it to the best English learner specialist in the county, and my legal duty is completely fulfilled.
Fully discharged.
Yeah.
And the source text spends a significant amount of time focusing not on what those 14 words say, but on the vast amount of silence they create.
Right. What's missing?
Think about what is omitted from that requirement.
Well, there is no requirement to state a cause.
Not at all.
The district doesn't have to connect the dismissal to the teacher's professional evaluation.
No, the evaluations are entirely irrelevant under this specific statute.
That makes no sense.
Furthermore, there is no mandate to have placed the teacher on a prior improvement plan. There is no requirement to offer a hearing before the school board.
So no appeal.
There is no appellate process for the teacher to challenge the decision whatsoever.
Wow.
And perhaps most critically for the community, there is zero obligation to explain to the parents of the English learner students why their child's primary educational advocate is disappearing next year.
It is a legally permitted void. The law requires a deadline to be met and literally nothing else.
Nothing. If the superintendent hands you the paper by April 30th, the transaction is over.
But there is a catch if they miss the deadline, right?
Yeah.
The sources mention a ticking clock aspect to this.
Yes. Under subsection 3 of that same law, if the employing board fails to give that written notice by the April 30th deadline, the teacher automatically receives a contract for the next school year.
Okay, and this is where the tenure trap is sprung.
Exactly.
Let's walk through that trap. How exactly does a teacher in Kentucky earn tenure? I know the timeline is crucial here.
The rules for attaining continuing service status, tenure, are governed by a different statute, KRS 161.7 Word 7.1,
Right.
which the Kentucky Department of Education details in their teacher tenure FAQ.
So what are the criteria?
There are several.
Mm-hmm.
A teacher has to work 4 out of the last 6 years in the same district. They have to hold a valid teaching certification. They have to actually show up and assume their duties in the 5th year.
Makes sense.
But the critical structural mechanism that the sources highlight is the requirement regarding current employment.
Right. The phrase in the text was that the teacher must be renewed for a 5th year, quote, while currently employed.
Yes. That phrase is the entire linchpin of this phenomenon. You have to be offered that 5th-year contract while you are still an active employee.
So if a superintendent uses those 14 words of silence to non-renew you on April 30th of your 4th year,
then you are no longer currently employed for the upcoming academic year.
Sure.
The chain is broken. And the moment that continuity is severed, everything you have built in that district vanishes into a legal void. Your 4 years of exemplary evaluations, your deep institutional knowledge of the community, your rapport with the students, none of it matters.
it just disappears.
The tenure clock resets to 0. Even if the district turns around and hires you back in July, you are starting over from scratch as a probationary teacher.
That is just wild. They can effectively erase your professional history with a single piece of paper, just to prevent you from crossing that year 5 threshold.
Yes.
But wait, how does a district square this with the massive teacher evaluation systems we hear so much about? The text mentions PGES, the Professional Growth and Effectiveness System.
Right. PGES.
I mean, millions of dollars and thousands of administrative hours are spent observing teachers, rating them in different domains, and ensuring they're highly effective.
This is the profound paradox of the accomplished rating that the source material points out. Kentucky actually has an administrative regulation, 5 KAR 3.010, and it explicitly states that personnel decisions in school districts are supposed to be based on evaluation data.
Which makes total logical sense. I mean, if you are going to let someone go, you should have data proving they aren't doing the job.
Exactly. But we have an enforcement gap.
Ah.
The regulation says decisions should be based on evaluation data. But when a superintendent non-renews an accomplished Year 4 teacher, Under the 14-word loophole, there is no mechanism to enforce that regulation.
So it's a suggestion,
Yeah,
basically.
essentially.
Oh.
If a teacher has straight accomplished ratings, and there are no documented concerns, and no improvement plan exists, well, the decision clearly isn't based on performance data.
It's based on the calendar.
Right.
It's based on the impending threat of tenure.
Precisely. The disconnect is massive.
Yeah.
But because the non-renewal statute provides no avenue for the teacher to challenge the decision or demand a hearing, the district is never forced to explain the contradiction.
They don't have to defend why they're firing one of their best educators.
No, they just point to the April 30th deadline and say, well, we met the statutory requirement.
I want to look at this from the other side just to fully understand the incentive here. Let's say a district doesn't use this loophole. They let an EL specialist pass into year 5 and they earn tenure.
Okay.
What happens if the district wants to fire them in year 6?
The landscape changes completely. Once a teacher attains continuing contract status, they are protected by a much more rigorous statute, KRS 161.790.
And that's for dismissing them for cause.
Yes, this is the statute that governs dismissing a tenured teacher for cause.
And what does for cause actually look like in practice? Because from what I read in the text, it is a monumental administrative undertaking.
It is incredibly arduous. Under the cause statute, the superintendent cannot just hand over a one-sentence letter.
Right.
They have to provide written notice of highly specific charges. They have to allow the teacher time to respond. They have to convene a formal hearing before an administrative tribunal.
That sounds like a full trial.
It basically is. The district has to produce documented evidence, call witnesses, and legally prove that the teacher's actions constitute statutory grounds for termination.
And those grounds are strictly defined, right? It's not just, we don't think you're a good fit.
Far from it. One of the primary grounds for termination is inefficiency. But the law doesn't let the superintendent just subjectively decide a teacher is inefficient.
Okay, so how is it defined?
The statute strictly defines inefficiency as having 2 consecutive annual summative evaluations of ineffective or 3 ineffective ratings within a 5-year period.
Wow. Okay, so let's put our accomplished year 4 EL teacher back into this scenario.
Let's do it.
If they have glowing evaluations across the board, they are mathematically nowhere near the legal threshold for termination under the cause statute.
They literally cannot be fired for cause. It is legally impossible based on their performance record.
So the district is looking at a teacher who is performing so well that they will soon become completely unfireable.
And that is the exact moment the non-renewal loophole is utilized. It is a preemptive strike.
That preemptive strike.
The superintendent uses the absolute silence of the non-renewal statute precisely because they cannot use the dismissal statute.
Right.
The teacher isn't being removed because they are failing. They are being removed specifically because they are succeeding and will soon become legally protected by that success.
It's punishing excellence because excellence leads to job security, and job security is inconvenient for the employer.
That's a great way to put it.
Does the State Department of Education know this is happening? Because the text mentions a warning from the KDE, but it seems like they are entirely missing the point.
The source material highlights a very specific and somewhat ironic warning contained in the KDE's August 2025 Teacher Tenure FAQ.
What does it say?
The State Department explicitly warned school districts that they should not, quote, reduce responsibilities in an attempt to subvert the legal requirements of tenure.
Meaning, a district shouldn't try to stop a teacher from getting tenure by suddenly taking away half their classes, so they only count as a part-time employee in year 4.
Correct. The KDE recognizes that districts have an incentive to subvert the tenure timeline, and they warn against this slow, passive-aggressive reduction of duties.
But as the source points out, that warning is completely blind to the actual tactic being used.
Entirely blind.
Why bother slowly reducing a teacher's classes when you can just drop the guillotine on April 30th? It's like the state is putting a giant deadbolt on the front door, putting up a sign that says, "Do not enter," while leaving the garage door completely wide open and the keys in the ignition.
That's a perfect analogy. The KDE is warning against a complex subversion tactic while ignoring the outright, unexplained non-renewal that happens every spring.
And it leaves the EL teacher completely exposed?
Yes, it does.
Okay, we have established how a district can legally erase a highly rated professional without giving a reason, but I am still struggling with the why.
The motive.
Yeah. If this teacher is fantastic at their job, and they are keeping the district compliant with all these complex federal laws regarding English learners, why on earth would a superintendent want them gone? Even if they can fire them easily, why would they?
To understand the motive, we have to stop looking at the school district as a purely educational institution and start looking at it as a corporate entity managing risk, overhead, and a very tight budget.
Okay.
The underlying reason is cold, hard arithmetic.
Money. It always comes back to money.
Entirely. We have to examine the financial incentive structure built into Kentucky's public education system. And the foundation of that structure is the teacher salary schedule.
Break that down for me. How does the pay scale actually create an incentive to fire experienced staff?
Well, in Kentucky, teacher salaries are step-based. They advance incrementally every single year based on years of experience, and they also bump up when a teacher earns a higher degree, like a master's or a rank I certification.
So a teacher in year 5 inherently earns a higher base salary than a teacher in year 1. And the sources provide some specific math on this. When a superintendent uses that April 30th loophole to non-renew a year 4 teacher, and they turn around over the summer and hire a brand new, fresh out of college year 1 teacher to fill that exact same room, they generate immediate salary savings.
The text estimates those annual savings to be anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000,
Okay.
depending on the local district's specific pay scale and state minimums.
Wait, let's just pause and look at that number. You're telling me a district is willing to completely upend a vulnerable child's educational trajectory, sever deep community ties, and throw away 4 years of specialized institutional knowledge for $3,000.
Yeah.
That is the cost of a used commercial lawnmower for the maintenance department. It can't be enough to justify this kind of systemic disruption.
You have to look at it over time, and you have to view it from the perspective of a rural county finance officer staring at a budget deficit. They don't just do this once. They continuously cycle the position.
Meaning, they fire the year 4 teacher, hire a year 1 teacher, let that new teacher work for 4 years, fire them on April 30th, and hire another year 1 teacher.
Exactly. They create a permanent revolving door.
Yeah.
And when you extrapolate those annual savings over a 5-year period, the cumulative savings for just that one single position range from $15,000 to $40,000.
Okay, $40,000 is a different conversation.
Right. For a small rural county district that operates on incredibly thin margins where property tax revenue is low and state funding is stagnant, $40,000 is not a rounding error.
No, it's a real chunk of change.
It is a highly attractive line item adjustment. It can fund new textbooks for an elementary school. It can pay the winter heating bill for the high school. From a purely fiscal standpoint, cycling out experienced teachers is a reliable way to manufacture cash flow.
So the step-based salary schedule, which was originally designed to reward teachers for their loyalty and experience, is actually being weaponized against them.
Yes.
The more experienced you become, the more expensive you are, and the bigger the target on your back becomes as year 4 approaches.
That is the tragic irony of the compensation model. But the salary schedule is only one half of the budget math. We also have to calculate the legal cost of risk management.
Right, going back to what it takes to actually dismiss a tenured teacher for cause.
When a district grants tenure to an employee, they are assuming a massive, long-term financial liability.
Because it's so hard to undo.
Exactly. If that tenured teacher eventually struggles, or if the district simply needs to remove them for a legitimate reason down the line, we already discussed how arduous the KRS 161.790 dismissal process is.
The tribunals, the documented evidence, the hearings.
And all of that requires lawyers. The legal costs for a district to prosecute a contested dismissal of a tenured teacher can easily range from $10,000 to $50,000.
Wow.
And if the teacher appeals the tribunal's decision to a circuit court, those costs can skyrocket even higher.
So compare that potential $50,000 legal nightmare to the cost of using the 14-word loophole.
The cost of the non-renewal is effectively zero. It is the administrative time required for a secretary to print a form letter and the cost of the ink to sign it.
That's depressing.
When you look at this system through the lens of pure corporate risk management, the law mathematically rewards districts for maintaining a permanent probationary status for as many positions as they can get away with. Tenure is an expensive liability. Permanent probation is free flexibility.
And speaking of flexibility, the source material ties this desire for permanent probation directly into another specific state law, KRS 161.800.
Yes, which deals with reduction in force, or what people usually call layoffs or RFs.
Right.
KRS 161.800 dictates the strict protocols a district must follow when they face a genuine financial crisis, like a massive drop in enrollment or a major cut in state funding, and they absolutely have to eliminate teaching positions.
So who gets cut first?
Under the law, the superintendent is legally obligated to protect tenured teachers. They must lay off probationary, non-tenured teachers first. Seniority and continuing contract status act as a shield.
Which means if an English learner specialist earns tenure, they cannot be the first one on the chopping block when the central office panics over a budget shortfall.
But if that EL specialist is kept in a state of permanent probation by being cycled out every 4 years, their position can be eliminated overnight.
Just gone.
And this brings us to a massive structural vulnerability specific to EL programs.
The funding sources.
Exactly. EL positions in Kentucky are frequently funded, either partially or entirely, by federal Title III funds.
And those are specifically allocated for language instruction for English learners, right?
Right. But those federal funds are notoriously volatile. They fluctuate based on the district's annual EL enrollment numbers and the whims of federal congressional appropriations.
So a district might have $80,000 in Title III funding this year, but only $40,000 next year if a large group of immigrant families moves out of the county.
And if that funding drops, the district does not want to be stuck paying the salary of a tenured EL teacher out of their own general fund.
They want maximum instantaneous budget flexibility.
They want the ability to look at a drop in federal funds on a Monday and eliminate the EL position on a Tuesday without violating the reduction in force statutes.
Wow.
The only way to guarantee that flexibility is to ensure the EL specialist never achieves continuing contract status.
If the goal is purely to save $5,000 on the salary schedule or maintain budget flexibility, a district could theoretically use this year 4 loophole to fire a veteran high school football coach or the head of the math department. The math would work exactly the same.
Right, the numbers are the same.
But they don't do that. The source material spends an entire section exploring why the English learner specialist is specifically targeted for this treatment. Why are they the ones caught in the revolving door?
Because the budget math only works if the target is politically and structurally invisible. And the EL specialist represents the perfect storm of systemic vulnerability.
How so?
It begins with how these professionals are classified on paper.
Let's explore that, because the text makes a big deal about misclassification. EL teachers are highly trained, right? They aren't just aides or volunteers.
Far from it. EL teachers in Kentucky must be highly certified professionals. They hold specialized credentials from the Education Professional Standards Board, or EPSB.
Right.
By every definition under the law, specifically KRS 161.720, which defines who is a teacher for the purposes of tenure, they are certified instructional personnel who absolutely qualify for continuing contract status.
But the districts play word games.
Exactly. The sources note a widespread practice where districts intentionally categorize these professionals with alternate titles. They don't call them EL teachers.
What do they call them?
They classify them on the organizational chart as program coordinators or language interventionists or Title III compliance officers.
Why does the title matter if they are doing the exact same job with the exact same certification?
It matters because it creates a legal gray area. The tenure statute requires a teacher to be in a position requiring certification. By labeling the role as a coordinator or an interventionist, the district blurs the lines.
Oh, I see.
They create ambiguity about whether the role falls strictly under the tenure protections.
And if a year 4 interventionist tries to fight their non-renewal in court, they have to first prove they were legally a teacher, which burns time and money.
Right. And in administrative law, ambiguity almost always benefits the institution, not the individual employee.
Huh.
The alternate titles make the non-renewal significantly easier to defend if the state or a union ever asks questions.
That's insidious. They're functionally teachers of record, but on paper, they are middle management consultants.
Yeah.
But even beyond the legal wordplay, there is a physical reality to the job that makes them vulnerable. The text talks about the phenomenon of the single position district.
This is a profound geographic and organizational vulnerability, especially in rural Kentucky.
Right.
In a large urban district, you might have an entire ESL department at a high school with a department head and several colleagues. But in many county districts, there's exactly one certified EL teacher for the entire school system.
One person.
One person covering 3 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school across a massive geographic area. They're a department of 1.
Let's think about what that means practically. If you fire a 4th grade math teacher, there are 5 other 4th grade math teachers in the building who have to instantly absorb 30 displaced students.
Exactly.
The system feels the shockwave immediately. The other teachers complain to the principal complains to the superintendent.
But when you fire the sole EL specialist, there is no department to absorb the shock. There are no colleagues teaching the same subject to push back against the administration. The isolation makes the removal frictionless.
And they don't really have a boss advocating for them either, do they? The text mentions they operate outside the normal chain of command.
This is a critical point about school hierarchy. A building principal is judged almost entirely on core content state testing.
Math, reading, science scores.
That is their primary domain of instructional leadership. But the EL specialist is dealing with highly complex federal compliance laws, Title III regulations, and language proficiency assessments that often fall outside the principal's direct expertise or daily focus.
So the EL teacher is often managed remotely by someone at the central office, or they just operate autonomously as a satellite.
Exactly. Which means that when April 30th rolls around and the central office finance director decides to cut the year 4 EL teacher to save $4,000, that teacher lacks an administrative champion.
Because the principal isn't really their boss in a functional way.
Right. There is no principal pounding their fist on the superintendent's desk demanding that this specific teacher be protected, because the principal doesn't directly manage or fully comprehend the intricate compliance work the EL teacher does. They are professionally orphaned.
Which brings us to the most brutal reality outlined in the source material, the political landscape. We asked earlier why this doesn't happen to the high school football coach, and the answer is entirely political.
School districts are governed by elected school boards. Superintendents answer to those boards. Therefore, superintendents are hyper-aware of political capital within the community.
If a superintendent tries to non-renew a beloved, successful high school football coach to save a few $1,000s, what happens?
The parents of the starting quarterback, the local business owners who sponsor the stadium, the alumni, they all mobilize. They show up at the next board meeting. They call the local newspaper. They threaten to vote the school board members out of office in the next election.
It would be a disaster for them.
The superintendent would face a massive, highly visible public relations crisis. The political cost of removing that coach is exorbitant.
Now let's look at the political capital of the families served by the English learner specialist.
It is a stark contrast. The parents of EL students are often dealing with significant language barriers. They may be recent immigrants, navigating complex socioeconomic challenges. They may be working multiple hourly jobs that prevent them from attending Tuesday night school board meetings.
And crucially, they often do not vote in local school board elections at high rates, either due to citizenship status or systemic disenfranchisement.
Therefore, they possess very little conventional political capital. The superintendent knows this.
So they know they can get away with it.
When they non-renew the sole EL advocate for these families, they know there will be no community uproar. There will be no angry crowd at the board meeting. There will be no front-page story in a local paper. The vulnerable students simply lose their champion, and the administration faces absolute silence.
The political cost of firing the EL specialist is functionally zero. It perfectly aligns with the budget arithmetic. It is a low-cost, low-risk, high-flexibility maneuver executed against the most politically defenseless population in the district.
It is the path of least resistance, optimized by the statutory loopholes we discussed.
So we've established that the district is saving a few $1,000s, and they get away with it because nobody with political power complains. It looks like a perfect corporate crime on a spreadsheet. But the source material introduces a massive plot twist here.
A very expensive plot twist.
The district assumes they can just post the vacant job in May, hire a cheaper, brand-new teacher over the summer, and pocket the savings. But what actually happens when they try to replace that professional?
They collide head-on with macroeconomic reality. The spreadsheet logic completely breaks down because it relies on an assumption of infinite labor supply. But the data shows that the labor supply for educators, especially specialized ones, has collapsed.
We have to look at the teacher shortage data provided in the text because it paints a very grim picture.
The sources cite a 2023 report from the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. The data is alarming. Teacher turnover in the state of Kentucky has reached a trend level of 10.9%.
And the text emphasizes that this isn't just a temporary pandemic hangover. This is a sustained structural exodus from the profession.
Yes. On average, across the state, only 83.5% of teaching jobs are currently being filled. Let that sink in.
Like 83.5%?
Yes. More than 16% of the classrooms in the state either have no teacher or are being covered by underqualified emergency substitutes. Furthermore, the pipeline to replace these departing teachers is drying up rapidly.
How bad is the pipeline?
The state has produced 1,573 fewer teacher preparation program completers over the last 5 years compared to the 5 years prior.
That's an 11.6% drop in the raw number of college students actually graduating with teaching degrees. So the pool of available, cheap, year-one teachers that the superintendent is banking on, it barely exists anymore.
And that is the general teaching population. When we narrow the focus to English learner specialists, the shortage goes from concerning to catastrophic.
The text highlights data from the Learning Policy Institute regarding ESL and bilingual education teachers.
According to the data, ESL teachers are among the most difficult positions to fill in the entire country. They are statistically harder to source and hire than high school math teachers, and harder to find than special education teachers.
And where are these year 4 non-renewals happening most frequently? In rural, small county Kentucky districts.
Yes.
So these superintendents are actively creating artificial vacancies in the single most difficult to fill academic specialty, located in the hardest to staff geographic areas in the state.
It is an astonishingly reckless gamble with the district's operational stability.
It's like, imagine you decide to skip a $50 oil change on your car because money is tight this month. You look at your budget and say, hey, I just saved $50. You feel like a financial genius.
Until the car breaks down.
And then 3 weeks later, your engine seizes up on the highway and you have to pay a mechanic $5,000 for a completely new engine. The district saves $4,000 on the step schedule by firing the veteran, but the text points out they might end up spending $15,000 on continuous recruiting efforts, paying for long-term substitute coverage, and paying consultants for compliance remediation just to plug the hole they created.
Assuming they could even find someone to plug the hole, which the 83.5% fill rate suggests, is highly unlikely. Often, the position simply sits vacant for months.
And what happens when that position sits vacant? Because the federal government doesn't care about the Kentucky teacher shortage, do they?
The federal government does not care in the slightest. The mandates under the Every Student Succeeds Act, specifically Title III, do not pause just because a superintendent tried to save money and lost the gamble. The legal obligation to identify, serve, and monitor English learner students is absolute.
The source material provides a meticulous, cascading list of what happens to a district's federal compliance when this position sits empty in September. Walk me through the timeline of this failure. Let's say a new immigrant family moves into the county in August and they enroll their child. What happens?
Under Title III regulations, the district has a strict, federally mandated 30-day window to identify newly enrolled English learner students, assess their language proficiency, and place them in appropriate services.
But the only certified person who knows how to administer the widest screener assessment was fired in April.
So the 30-day window shatters. The student sits in a mainstream classroom, completely unassessed, receiving no legal accommodations.
And what about the returning students, the ones who were there last year?
Every EL student requires a program support plan, or PSP. This is a legally binding document that dictates exactly what accommodations the student must receive in their core classes, like modified tests or bilingual dictionaries. Those PSPs must be updated and distributed to all the mainstream teachers at the start of the year.
But the veteran teacher who spent years learning exactly what each student needs is gone.
So the PSPs sit untouched, outdated, or generic. The mainstream teachers are flying blind.
And the state testing. The text mentions access scores.
Every spring, EL students take the WIDA Access Assessment to measure their progress in English. Those scores arrive over the summer. A highly trained EL specialist spends weeks analyzing that data to adjust schedules and interventions for the fall.
But if they're gone?
When the position is vacant or filled by an overwhelmed long-term substitute, those complex data reports come back and just gather dust. They are unanalyzed and unutilized.
The text also mentions parent notifications and monitoring periods.
Federal law requires districts to send specific, translated notifications to parents regarding their child's program status and progress. Without the specialist, those letters don't go out. Furthermore, when a student becomes proficient and exits the EL program, the district is legally mandated to actively monitor their academic progress for 4 subsequent years to ensure they don't regress.
Let me guess. The tracking system for that 4-year monitoring period was maintained entirely by the teacher who just got fired.
Exactly. The intricate infinite campus data tracking, the spreadsheets, the institutional memory, it all decays instantly.
Every single one of those drop balls, the missed 30-day window, the outdated PSP, the unnotified parent, the lapsed monitoring, is a distinct, actionable federal compliance failure.
And the sources make a crucial point about legal liability here. These federal violations do not require proof of malicious intent.
Meaning they can't just say, oops, we couldn't find a teacher.
No. Under the Office of Civil Rights Definitive Dear Colleague letter issued in 2015, a school district is held strictly responsible for systemic failures to serve EL students, regardless of whether the administration actively intended to violate the law or was just trying to balance a budget. Incompetence or understaffing is not a legal defense.
Which brings the financial arithmetic full circle. The district thought they were saving $4,000. But what happens when the state or the federal government audits this mess?
A single complaint filed with the Office of Civil Rights or a single targeted monitoring visit from the Kentucky Department of Education that uncovers these cascading failures will trigger a massive legal intervention. The district will be forced into a mandated corrective action plan.
Meaning they have to hire lawyers, hire expensive outside consultants to fix the data, and pay compensatory education costs for the students they neglected.
The administrative and legal costs of a single federal civil rights intervention will utterly dwarf the initial $4,000 salary savings. It is catastrophic risk management. The district trades a minor, predictable budget line item for massive, unpredictable federal liability.
So we've established that the district is risking federal fines while saving pennies, but there is a human element completely missing from this spreadsheet logic. What is actually happening to the English learner in the classroom while the adults play financial chess?
That is the most profound cost of all, and it brings us to the state-specific educational mandate. Kentucky Statute KRS 158.6451 requires that school districts provide programs for English learners that are explicitly designed to develop English language proficiency and provide meaningful access to the core curriculum.
The key word there seems to be meaningful, because the source text draws a very sharp, deliberate distinction between the appearance of compliance and the delivery of meaningful education.
It's the difference between a paper trail and actual learning. Even if a district gets lucky, survives the summer shortage, and manages to hire a cheaper, brand-new year-one teacher to put in that classroom by September, they are still failing the spirit of KRS 158.6451.
Let's explore why. Why is a year-one teacher, even an earnest, hard-working one, fundamentally different from the year-4 teacher who was just erased?
Because meaningful education for vulnerable populations relies overwhelmingly on deep, trusting relationships and institutional knowledge. It is not just about delivering a lesson plan. The year-4 teacher knows a student's specific trauma history.
They know the context.
They know that a student arrived from a refugee camp and is triggered by certain loud noises. They know the complex family dynamics, which parents work the night shift, which older sibling is translating the mail at home.
They have longitudinal data. They know that this specific student struggled with phonics in 2nd grade, but had a breakthrough in 3rd grade using a specific visual strategy.
Exactly. And when a superintendent uses the non-renewal loophole to cycle out that specialist every 4 years, they are intentionally, systematically destroying that institutional knowledge.
They are burning down the library to save a few bucks on electricity.
A brand new teacher does not possess that accumulated system expertise. They don't know the families. They have to spend their entire first year just trying to build trust and figure out the baseline.
Right.
By the time they finally acquire that deep knowledge, they reach year 4, and the district fires them to start the cycle over again.
The district is providing the optical illusion of an educational program. There is a warm body in the room with an ESL certification while systematically undermining its actual effectiveness. The students are trapped in a perpetual state of starting over with novices.
And while the impact on the students is tragic, the source material identifies an even more insidious consequence. The most damaging result of this entire cycle doesn't happen to the teacher who is fired, and it doesn't happen in the federal audit. It happens quietly in the minds of the teachers who are left behind.
The text calls this the whisper network and the chilling effect. Because these non-renewals don't happen in a vacuum, do they? The profession watches.
They absolutely watch. The source text emphasizes that the certified ESL teacher community in Kentucky, specifically the KY-TESOL network, is small, specialized, and tightly knit. They attend the same state conferences. They participate in the same online forums.
Word of mouth travels fast.
Very fast. And they don't even need to use named districts or identify specific teachers to share the pattern. They all know the story. They hear about the highly qualified colleague in the next county over.
The one who had straight accomplished evaluations. The one who stayed late to help families with immigration paperwork. The one who fought tooth and nail for their students' accommodations.
And they hear that this paragon of the profession was quietly called into the office on April 30th, handed a form letter, and told they were eligible for rehire.
The community sees exactly what happened, and this creates a profound psychological chilling effect across the entire state.
Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a teacher who witnesses this. Let's role-play a scenario. Imagine you are a Year 3 EL teacher in a rural district. You are passionate, you know the federal law.
Okay.
You are reviewing your students' files in October, and you notice that the general education math teacher is completely ignoring the legally mandated accommodations on a student's program support plan.
It is a clear violation of federal law, and the student is failing math because of it.
As an advocate, your job is to report that. Your job is to march into the principal's office, point to the PSP, and demand that the district follow the law and fix the intervention.
But you pause because you remember what happened to the accomplished teacher in the neighboring county. You remember the whisper network.
What is the logical lesson you internalize in that moment?
The lesson is loud, clear, and terrifying. Your deep knowledge of federal compliance law is not an asset to your career. It is a liability.
Because demanding compliance creates friction.
Exactly. Documenting failures creates legal risk for the district. Insisting that the 30-day identification window be met, or demanding that general education teachers follow the PSTs, annoys the administration. It makes you a problem.
And you realize that because of the 14-word loophole in KRS 161.750, the district doesn't need to prove you are a bad teacher to get rid of you. They just have to wait until April 30th of next year, hand you a piece of paper, and your career in that district is over.
So you face an agonizing choice. Do you advocate for the vulnerable student and risk professional execution at the end of the year? Or do you stay quiet, look the other way, and survive until you reach the safety of tenure?
You choose survival. You self-censor.
The system mathematically incentivizes silence.
Yes, it does.
Wait, isn't this the exact diametric opposite of what the massive teacher evaluation framework is trying to achieve? The whole point of the PGS system, the millions of dollars spent on observations and rubrics, is to encourage excellence. It is designed to train teachers to be fierce advocates for student success.
It is the ultimate perversion of the educational mandate. We are literally training our best, most legally knowledgeable teachers to self-censor. We are training them to ignore neglect. The legally optimized silence of the non-renewal statute produces an institutional silence within the schools themselves.
Teachers learn that keeping their heads down, minimizing their presence, and ignoring compliance failures is the only viable path to job security.
And because everyone is self-censoring out of fear, these systemic failures multiply in the dark. The state doesn't see them. The federal government doesn't see them. There are no OCR complaints generated because the very people who know how to identify the violations and file the complaints are terrified of losing their livelihoods.
The silence becomes self-sustaining.
Absolutely.
We have covered an incredible, deeply unsettling amount of ground today. Let me try to synthesize this entire journey for you, the listener, because the architecture of this pattern is complex but devastatingly effective.
It operates perfectly as designed.
We started by tracing the massive 14-word loophole in Kentucky statute, KRS 161.750, which allows a superintendent to legally erase an accomplished professional without a shred of justification or explanation simply by meeting an April 30th deadline.
We examined the cold arithmetic of the budget math. We revealed how step-based salary schedules and the high legal costs of tenure incentivize districts to constantly cycle out experienced professionals in favor of cheaper, permanently probationary replacements.
We explored the profound structural vulnerabilities of the EL specialist. We looked at how they're isolated as a department of one, intentionally misclassified into legal gray areas, and left professionally orphaned.
And we noted that they serve a marginalized community that lacks the political capital to defend them, making their removal a frictionless transaction for the administration.
We mapped out the devastating collision between this spreadsheet logic and the real-world teacher shortage. We saw how firing a veteran leads to shattered 30-day identification windows, unanalyzed data, and massive federal compliance liability.
We discussed the human cost, the intentional destruction of institutional knowledge, and the denial of meaningful education to vulnerable students.
And finally, we uncovered the chilling effect. The whisper network that actively trains the next generation of educators to abandon their advocacy in exchange for survival, allowing systemic neglect to flourish unseen in the dark.
The source text does offer a brief mention of a proposed reform to address this entire architecture. It seems almost painfully simple, yet it would fundamentally alter the dynamic.
But what is the proposal?
The text suggests requiring a mandatory written justification when any teacher rated accomplished or distinguished is non-renewed.
Just force the district to explain the contradiction on paper.
Exactly. If the state evaluation system says a teacher is excellent, but the superintendent wants to fire them, the district must document the specific, justifiable reason for the disconnect. It wouldn't stop a district from removing a genuinely problematic teacher, but it would close the 14-word gap that currently allows the financially motivated cycling mechanism to operate entirely in the shadows.
It would force accountability into the void.
It's a modest proposal, but a crucial one.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, there is a lingering, incredibly serious question that you, the listener, have to mull over. We started this conversation by asking you to imagine being that accomplice teacher sitting in the central office, being handed an unexplained termination letter on April 30th. But let's step back and look at the system as a whole.
We have to look at the broader implications for public service.
If a public institution's financial constraints and legal frameworks mathematically incentivize the silencing and the removal of the very people who understand the rules best, who is left to ensure that system actually serves the vulnerable children it was built for?
If advocacy is treated as a liability, the core mission of the institution is fundamentally compromised.
Is the public education system broken? Or, when you look at the exact wording of the statutes, the arithmetic of the budgets, and the political reality of who gets protected and who gets erased, is the system working exactly as it was designed to?